So I'm back to read Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, Chapter 6. Um, but I'm going to back it up a little bit and remind us what happened the last time I read. When I last read, Cassie had gone into Strawberry with her grandmother to sell some goods, food or whatever. And when she was there, she ended up getting into a little trouble in the store with the white store owner. And then she bumped into Lily and Jean Sims. And I will go down to the part where Mr. Sims shoved her to the ground. Someone caught it, my arm, from behind, painfully twisted it, and shoved me off the sidewalk into the road. I landed bottom first on the ground. Mr. Sims glared down at me. When my gal, Lillian Jean, says for you to get yourself off the sidewalk, you get. You hear? Behind him were his sons, R.W. and Melvin. People from the store began to yell out to the Simses, "Ain't that the same little N-word who was cutting up back there at Jim Lee's store?" someone asked. "Yeah, she the one," answered Mr. Sims. "You hear me talking to you, gal? You apologize to Ms. Lillian Jean this minute." I stared up at Mr. Sims, frightened. Jeremy appeared to be frightened too. "I apologized already." Jeremy seemed relieved that I had spoken. She did, Pa. Right before you come, she did." Mr. Sims turned an angry gaze upon his son, and Jeremy faltered, looked at me, and hung his head. Then Mr. Sims jumped into the street. I moved away from him, trying to get up. He was mean looking, all red in the face and bearded. I was afraid he was going to hit me before I could get to my feet, but he didn't. I scrambled up and ran blindly for the wagon. Someone grabbed me. I fought wildly, attempting to pull loose. "Stop, Cassie," Big Ma said. "Stop, it's me. We're going home now." "Not 'fore she apologizes to my gal, y'all ain't," said Mr. Sims. Big Ma gazed down at me, fear in her eyes, then back at the ground, then back at the growing crowd. "She's just a child. Tell her." Big Ma looked at me again, her eyes cracking as she spoke. "Go on, child. Apologize." "But Big Ma," her voice hardened, "do like I say." I scowled hard. "Go on." "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I'm sorry, Ms. Lillian Jean," demanded Mr. Sims. "Big Ma," I barked. "Say it, child." A painful tear slid down my cheek, and my lips trembled. "I'm sorry, Ms. Lillian Jean." When the words had been spoken, I turned and fled, crying into the back of the wagon. No day in all my life had ever been as cruel as this one. So the one thing we'll have to get used to is remembering that Cassie's the narrator now. So it's the young 9-year-old girl rather than her 10-year-old father, her father back when he was 10. So here we go, fast forwarding it 20 years from that time, from the time of the well. Chapter 6. The ride home was long and silent. None of us felt like talking, not even TJ. Big Ma had informed him shortly after leaving Strawberry that she didn't want to hear another word out of him before we reached home. He sulked for a while with a few audible grumbles, which no one paid any attention to. But finally he fell asleep and didn't awaken until we had driven up the Granger Road and stopped in front of the Avery house. By the time Jack pulled into our own yard, the night was a thick blackness and smelled of a coming rain. Big Ma climbed wearily down from the wagon and went into the house without a word. I stayed with Stacy to help him put the wagon inside the barn and unhitch and feed Jack. While I held the flashlight on the barn door, Stacy slowly slid aside the plank of wood that held the doors fastened. "Cassie," he said, "don't go blaming Big Ma for what she done. Why not? I asked angrily. She made me apologize to that old ugly Lillian Jean about something wasn't even my fault. She took them old Sims's side without even hearing mine. Well, maybe she couldn't help it, Cassie. Maybe she had to do it. Had to do it, I practically screamed. She didn't have to do nothing. She groaned, just like that Mr. Sims. She should have stood up for me. I wouldn't have done her that way. Stacy put the plank on the ground and leaned against the bar. There's things you just don't understand, Cassie. Oh, and I suppose you do, huh? Ever since you went down into Louisiana to get Papa last summer, you think you know so doggone much? Well, I bet you I know one thing. If it had been Papa, he wouldn't have made me apologize. He would have listened to me. Stacy sighed and swung open the barn doors. Well, Papa, that's different. But Big Ma ain't Papa, and you can't expect. His voice suddenly trailed off as he peered into the barn. He cried, Cassie, give me that flashlight. Then, before I could object, he tore the flashlight from my hand and shone it into the barn. What's Mr. Granger's car doing in our barn? I exclaimed as a silver Packard was unveiled by the light. So remember, Mr. Granger's the one who owns lots of plantations around them, and he's the one who really wants their land. Um, he's he's a white man who puts a lot of pressure on Big Mom. And it sounds like his silver Packard is in their barn. Without answering me, Stacy swiftly turned and ran toward the house. I followed closely behind. Throwing open the door to Mama's room, we stood dumbfounded in the doorway. Instead of Mr. Granger, a tall, handsome man, neatly dressed in a gray pinstripe suit and vest, stood by the fire with his arm around Big Ma. For a moment we swayed with excitement. Then, as if by signal, we both cried, Uncle Hammer! And dashed into his arms. Uncle Hammer was 2 years older than Papa, and unmarried. He came every winter to spend the Christmas season with us. Like Papa, he had dark red-brown skin, a square-jawed face, and high cheekbones. Yet there was a great difference between them somehow. His eyes, which showed a great warmth as he hugged and kissed us now, often had a cold, distant glaze, and there was an aloofness in him which the boys and I could never quite bridge. Aloofness is like a standoffish. No, he's not overly warm. When he let us go, Stacy and I both grew consciously shy and we backed away. I sat down beside Christopher John and Little Man, who were silently gazing up at Uncle Hammer. But Stacy stammered, What's Mr. Granger's car doing in our barn? That's your Uncle Hammer's car, Mama said. Did you unhitch Jack? Uncle Hammer's? Exclaimed Stacy, exchanging shocked glances with me. No kidding. Big Ma stammered, Hammer, you went and got a car just like Harlan Granger's? Uncle Hammer smiled, a strange, wry smile. Well, not exactly like it, Mama. Mine's a few months newer. Last year when I come down here, I was right impressed with that big old Packard of Mr. Harlan Fillmore Granger's, and I thought I'd like to own me one myself. It seems that Harlan Granger and I just have the same taste. He winked slyly at Stacy. Don't it, Stacy? Stacy grinned. Like maybe we can all go riding in it one day if it's all right with your mama. Oh, boy, cried Little Man. You mean it, Uncle Hammer? I asked. Mama, can we? We'll see, Mama said. But in any case, not tonight. Stacy, go take care of Jack and draw up a bucket of water for the kitchen. We've done the other chores. Since no one told me to help Stacy, I forgot all about Jack and settled back to listen to Uncle Hammer. Christopher John and Little Man, who Big Ma had feared would be moping because they hadn't been allowed to go to town, seemed not at all concerned that Stacy and I had gone. They were awestruck by Uncle Hammer, and compared to his arrival, a day in Strawberry was a minor matter. For a while, Uncle Hammer talked only to Mama and Big Ma, laughing from deep down inside himself like Papa. But then, to my surprise, he turned from them and addressed me. I understand you had your first trip to Strawberry today, Cassie, he said. What did you think? Big Ma stiffened, but I was pleased to have this opportunity to air my side of the strawberry affair. I didn't like it, I said. Them old Simses. Mary, I feel a bit hungry, Big Ma interrupted abruptly. Supper still warm? Yes, ma'am, said Mama, standing. I'll set it on the table for you. As Mama stood up, I started again. Them old Simses, let Cassie get it, Mary, said Big Ma nervously. You must be tired. I looked strangely at Big Ma, then up at Mama. Oh, I don't mind, said Mama. Now remember, Mama wasn't in Strawberry with them. She has absolutely no idea what went on. And Big Ma's very uncomfortable right now with Cassie saying something. And you guys, now having read The Well, can understand why. I don't mind, said Mama, heading for the kitchen. Go ahead, Cassie, and tell your uncle about Strawberry. That old Lillian Jean Sims made me so mad I could just spit. I admit I bumped into her, but that was because I was thinking about that old Mr. Barnett waiting on everybody else in his old store before he waited on us. Jim Lee Barnett? Asked Uncle Hammer, turning toward Big Ma. That old devil still living? Big Ma nodded mutely, and I went on. But I told him he shouldn't be waiting on everybody else before he waiting on us. Cassie, Big Ma exclaimed, hearing that bit of news for the first time. Uncle Hammer laughed. You told him that? Yes, sir, I said softly, wondering why he was laughing. Oh, that's great. Then what happened? Stacy made me leave. And Mr. Barnett told me I couldn't come back no more. And then I bumped into that confounded Lillian Jean, and she tried to make me get off the sidewalk. And then her daddy come along, and he... Big Ma's eyes grew large, and she whispered hoarsely, Cassie, I don't think. And he twisted my arm and knocked me off the sidewalk, I exclaimed, unwilling to muffle what Mr. Sims had done. I glanced triumphantly at Big Ma, but she wasn't looking at me. Her eyes, frightened and nervous, were on Uncle Hammer. I turned and looked at him too. His dark eyes had narrowed to thin, angry slits. He said, He knocked you off the sidewalk, Cassie? A grown man knocked you off the sidewalk? Yes, sir. This Lillian Jean Sims, her daddy wouldn't be Charlie Sims, would it? Yes, sir. Uncle Hammer grasped my shoulders. What else did he do to you? Nothing, I said, frightened by his eyes, except he wanted me to apologize to Lillian Jean because I wouldn't get in the road when she told me to. And you did? Big Ma said I had to. Uncle Hammer released me and sat very still. No one said a word. Then he stood slowly, his eyes icing into that cold, distant way they could, and he started toward the door, limping slightly on his left leg. Christopher John, Little Man, and I stared after him wonderingly, but Big Ma jumped up from her chair, knocking it over in her haste, and dashed after him. She grabbed his arm. Let it be, son, she cried. That child ain't hurt. Not hurt. You look into her eyes and tell me she ain't hurt. Mama came back from the kitchen with Stacy behind her. What is it? She asked, looking from Big Ma to Uncle Hammer. And when you think about it, Big Ma was Mama in the well. So, and now she's Big Ma. So she was there, she had to whip the boys. She saw how the boys dealt with Mr. Sims. She knew, all those years that Hammer and Mr. Sims had a dangerous, just a dangerous chemistry. Charlie Sims knocked Cassie off the sidewalk in Strawberry, and that child just told Hammer, said Big Ma in one breath, still holding on to Uncle Hammer's arm. Oh, Lord, Mama groaned. Stacy, get Mr. Morrison, quick now. As Stacy sped from the room, Mama's eyes darted to the shotgun over the bed, and she edged between it and Uncle Hammer. Uncle Hammer was watching her, and he said quietly, Don't worry, I ain't got to use David's gun. I got my own. Suddenly, Mama lunged to the side door, blocking it with her slender body. Hammer, now you listen to me. but Uncle Hammer gently but firmly pushed her to one side, and brushing Big Ma from his arm, opened the door and bounded down the steps into the light rain. Little man Christopher John and I dashed to the door as Big Ma and Mama ran after him. "Get back inside," Mama called over her shoulder, but she was too busy trying to grab Uncle Hammer to see that we obeyed, and we didn't move. "Hammer, Cassie's all right," she cried. "Don't go making unnecessary trouble." "Unnecessary trouble? You think my brother died and I got my leg half blown off in their German war to have some redneck knock Cassie around anytime it suits him? If I'd have knocked his girl down, you know what would have happened to me? Yeah, you know all right. Right now I'd be hanging from that oak over yonder. Let go of me, Mary." Mama and Big Ma couldn't keep him from reaching the car. But just as the Packard roared to life, a huge figure loomed from the darkness and jumped into the other side, and the car zoomed angrily down the drive and into the blackness of the Mississippi night. "Where'd he go?" I asked Mama, as she slowly climbed the steps. Her face under the glow of the lamp was tired, drained. "He went up to them Simses, didn't he, Mama? Didn't he?" "He's not going anywhere," Mama said, stepping aside and waiting until both Big Ma and Stacy were inside. Then she locked the door. "Mr. Morrison'll bring him back," said Christopher John confidently, although he looked somewhat bewildered by all that had happened. "If he don't," said Little Man ominously, "I bet you Uncle Hammer gonna teach that old Mrs. Sims a thing or two round here hitting on Cassie." "I hope he knocks his block off," I said. Mama's gaze blazed down upon us. "I think little mouths that have so much to say must be very tired." "No, Mama, we ain't. Go to bed." "Mama, it ain't but—" Mama's face hardened, and I knew it wouldn't be in my best interest to argue further. I turned and did as I was told. Christopher John and Little Man did the same. When I got to my door, I asked, "Ain't Stacy coming?" Mama glanced down at Stacy sitting by the fire. "I don't recall his mouth working so hard. Do you?" "No," I muttered, and went into my room. After a few minutes, Mama came in. Without a word of reprimand, she picked up my clothes from where I had tossed them at the foot of the bed, and absently draping them over the back of the chair, she said, "Stacy tells me you blame Big Mama for what happened today. Is that right?" I thought over her question and answered, "Not for all of it, just for making me apologize to that old dumb Lillian Jean Sims. She ought not have done that, Mama. Papa wouldn't have." "I don't want to hear what Papa wouldn't have done," Mom snapped, "or what Mr. Morrison wouldn't have done, or Uncle Hammer. You were with Big Mom, and she did what she had to do, and believe me, young lady, she didn't like it one bit more than you did." "Well, maybe not, but there's no maybe to it." "Yes'm," I said softly, deciding it was better to study the patchwork pattern on the quilt until the anger left Mama's eyes and I could talk to her again. After a moment, she sat beside me on the bed and raised my chin with the tip of her forefinger. "Big Ma didn't want you to be hurt," she said. "That was the only thing on her mind, making sure Mr. Sims didn't hurt you." "Yes'm," I murmured, then flared, "But Mama, that Lillian Jean ain't got the brains of a flea. How come I gotta go around calling her Miz like she grown or something?" Mama's voice grew hard. "Because that's the way of things, Cassie." "The way of what things?" I said. "Baby, you had to grow up a little today. And I wish, it doesn't matter what I wish, it happened. And you have to accept the fact that in this world outside of this house, things are not always as we'd have them be." "But Mama, it ain't fair. I didn't do nothing to that confounded Lillian Jean. How come Mrs. Sims went and pushed me like he did?" Mama's eyes looked deeply into mine. "Because he thinks Lillian Jean is better than you are, Cassie. And when you—" "That scrawny chicken-leg, snaggle-tooth Cassie!" Mama did not raise her voice, but the quiet force of my name silenced me. "Now," she said, "I didn't say Lillian Jean is better than you. I said Mr. Sims thinks she is. In fact, he thinks she's better than Stacy, Little Man, Christopher John, just because she's his daughter," I said, beginning to think Mrs. Sims was a bit touched in the head. Sorry, I lost my spot. No, baby, not because she's his daughter, because she's white. Mama's hold tightened on mine, but I exclaimed, "Shoot, white ain't nothing." Mama's grip did not lessen. "It is something, Cassie. White is something, just like black is something. Everybody born on this earth is something, and nobody, no matter what color, is better than anybody else." "And how come Mr. Sims don't know that?" "Because he's one of those people who has to believe that white people are better than black people to make himself feel big." I stared questioningly at Mama, not really understanding. Mama squeezed my hand and explained further. "You see, Cassie, many years ago when our people were first brought from Africa in chains to work as slaves in this country, like Mama's papa and Mama," Mama Rachel, or Mama nodded, "yes, baby, like Papa Luke and Mama Rachel. Except they were born right here in Mississippi, but their grandparents were born in Africa. And when they came, there were some white people who thought that it was wrong for people to be slaves. So those people who needed slaves to work in their fields and people who were making money bringing slaves from Africa started preaching that black people weren't really people like white people were, so that slavery would be viewed as all right. They also said that slavery was good for us because it taught us to be good Christians like the white people." She sighed deeply, her voice fading into distant whisper. "But they didn't teach us Christianity to save our souls, but to teach us obedience. They were afraid of slave revolts, and they wanted us to learn the Bible's teaching about slaves being loyal to their masters. But even teaching us Christianity didn't make us stop wanting to be free. And many slaves ran away." "Papa Luke ran away," I reminded her. "That's right, honey. He was hiding in a cave when freedom came, so I understand." She was silent a moment, then went on. "Well, after a while, slavery became so profitable to people who had slaves, and even those who didn't, that most folks decided to believe black people weren't really people like everybody else. And when the Civil War was fought, and Ma Rachel and Papa Luke and all the other slaves were freed, people continued to think that way. Even the Northerners who fought in the war didn't really see us as equal to white people. So now, even though 70 years have passed since slavery, most white people still think of us the way they did then, that we're not as good as they are. And people like Mr. Sims hold on to that belief harder than other folks because they have little else to hold on to. For him to believe that he's better than we are makes him feel like he's important, simply because he's white." Mama relaxed her grip. I knew she was waiting for me to speak. There was a sinking feeling in my stomach, and I felt as if the world had turned itself down upside down on me. Then I thought of Lily and Jean, and a surging anger gurgled upward, and I retaliated, "Well, they ain't." But I leaned closer to Mama, anxiously hoping that she would agree with me. "Of course they aren't, Cassie. White people may demand our respect, but what we give them isn't respect, it's fear. What we give to our own people is far more important because it's given freely. Now, you may have to call Lily and Jean Miss because white people say so, but you'll also call our own young ladies at church Miss because you really do respect them. Baby, we have no choice of what color we were born, or who our parents are, or whether we're rich or poor. What we do have is some choice over what we make of our lives once we're here. And I pray to God you'll make the best of yours." She hugged me warmly then and motioned me under the covers. As she turned the lamp low, I asked, "Mama, Uncle Hammer, if Mr. Morrison can't stop him, what'll happen?" "Mr. Morrison will bring him back," she said. "But just what if he can't and Uncle Hammer gets to Mr. Sims?" A shadowy fear fleeted across her face, disappeared with the dimming light. "I think you've done enough growing up for one day, Cassie," she said without answering my question. "Uncle Hammer will be all right. Now you go." So I'm only halfway through, but I'm going to stop there. I'm not even quite halfway through. I'm going to stop there, and we will see what happened with Uncle Hammer the next time we read. I know.